357 Magnum versus 45 ACP and short barrels. And what we have today is our Remington Golden Saber ammunition. Our 357 Magnum is a 125 grain brass jacket at hollow point rated at 1220 feet per second. Our 45 ACP+P is a 185 grain brass jacket at hollow point rated at 1140 feet per second. So this should be a pretty interesting test. I'm using my 2-inch barrel Taurus 605 to test the 357 Magnum, and my 3.3-inch barrel Smith & Wesson Shield 45 to test the 45 ACP. We have almost identical barrel travel in both of those, just because you don't count the chamber and the barrel length when you're talking a revolver, but you do with the semi-auto. So it equals out to both have about 2 inches of barrel travel. And just a note here, there is no such thing as 357 Magnum plus P, so this is not unfair. Essentially, Magnum is above plus P. It's more like a plus P plus P plus, something like that. So, interesting test. And these are brass jackets, so they actually, the bullets on most of the original Golden Saber bullets are actually smaller than typical diameter, and then they have a band around it that is the size of what the diameter should be, so that there's less drag on the bore. So it's interesting ammo, to say the least, and brass is like basically twice as hard as copper. So anyways, we're gonna see what we get here. We're gonna go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then we'll do my 10% clear ballistics gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see if the best potential those cartridges are. No fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point. Then I'm going to move on to doing more of a real world simulation, where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inches, and 8 inches in a real living target. So I like to keep these bullets within this first gel block without passing through the back rib simulation, because if it passes through, it's an indication it's kind of penetrating them maybe a little bit too much. And then after our ballistic gel test, I am going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 357 Magnum 125 grain brass jacket, a hollow point rated at 1120 feet per second. I am going to test this for bullet creep. So I got one of these bullets, the last one in the chamber, colored in black, because I have had bullet creep with these before, because that band that is smaller than the actual diameter sometimes will cause issues because they're not crimped into a crimp groove like normal. I believe the bullet's something like 0.34 hundredths of an inch rather than 0.357, something like that. So the way they crimp it is kind of rolling it or tapering it over top of like the band. It's kind of interesting. So I am going to check for bullet creep. So let's see how close I get to 1220 feet per second, and my little snub goes here. .1103, 1184, 1133, 1102. See, it's kind of dropping. And Remington has fixed that problem. I was hoping they would. It's not doing it anymore, because these are new production Remington, and they've done something to make it right again. So that's good. 1110 feet per second. So, not great, but not terrible. And, normal 357 is more like 1250 feet per second out of that gun. Recoil on that is a little bit less than typical, but still pretty high. Now we got our 45 ACP+P 185 grain brass jacket at hollow point, rated at 1140 feet per second. That's a pretty high rating. That's likely through a 5-inch barrel. Let's see what we get through my 3.3-inch barrel here. (1017), 1127, 1033, 1064, 1028. So we had one that was inconsistently high. I guess I can't get mad about that. But yeah, a pretty good power factor for a little subcompact 45 ACP. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. Into plain clear ballistics, no fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point, no rib simulation that can potentially slow down its penetration. So let's see what we get with our 357 Magnum. All right. Now let's hit that with our 45 ACP plus P. Let's go take a look. Yeah, that's some good energy dump with both of those. Both look fantastic. Our 357 Magnum looks like it did a little more damage. First 3-inch piece here, our 357 on the bottom, or 45 plus P on top. Very, very good. It does appear that there's more striation cutting with the 357 Magnum. It looks really, really good overall. Nice straight line penetration, and we have a penetration of about 16 3/4 inches of penetration, good expansion. So fantastic performance for that one. Our 45 ACP plus P 185 grain, it got some rollback, and that much rollback generally means we got over 65/100ths of an inch. I've just noticed that over the years. So what we got there is about 13 3/4 inches of penetration. Just fantastic performance overall. So let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, we have 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics on another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to back to represent hitting back ribs. This is where I've seen a lot of bullets fail. You know, I get a lot of good performance in plain clear ballistics, and then real world simulation they fail. So hopefully these will still do good. So let's see what we get here with our 357 Magnum through our real world simulation. All right. Now our 45 ACP plus P. Let's go take a look. All right, so let me throw the last 45 I got in this pistol up there. See if we get the same results with that second shot. Now let's go take a look. And yeah, I'm gonna say pretty similar performance from what I can tell anyways. Actually, no. Well, yeah, kind of, sort of. Got inconsistent expansion. That second shot there, right there. First one, it's tumbling through from no expansion. So, just not great. Not great overall. And here's the thing, if you go through that back rib simulation, you go about 3 inches beyond it, it's always been my calculations in my test that could indicate it's going to pass through a front-on shot on an average size person. So I'm definitely seeing that that could likely happen with that 45. With our 357 Magnum, we went right to that rib simulation, stopped at 19 inches. No expansion, but it did some decent damage from tumbling, and I don't think that that would significantly over-penetrate. Now our first 45 ACP plus P, you know, we went to about 23 3/4. So yeah, we could likely pass through an average size attacker and possibly be caught on the fabric on the back side, but still, that's just not good in my opinion. And then that second one, we went to about 20.5 inches, maybe on that account, and we might not pass through. So yeah, just not consistent performance. I don't like rounds that aren't consistent. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'm going to shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, and I have to address this. Every time people see snow on the ground, they say the same thing. It's cold out. Your results are invalid. Your gel blocks are frozen cold. It makes it tougher. And the results are skewed. Like, I'm warming my fingers right now on the inside of this, where I cut out that 45 caliber bullet, and I can feel it right now. It is about the temp of my house, about 65, 68 degrees. And once you get to about, I would say a 1/4 inch or less towards the start of that block where I cut it, it gets colder. So the inside of these blocks are the same year round, and I do that specifically to stay consistent. I don't come out here and leave these blocks out days in advance out in the cold. I don't know why people think that, but believe me, I've got hundreds of comments that that's what I do. So here's a look at our bullets. Here's our 357 Magnum and our 45 ACP through plain gel. And honestly, when I saw these, I thought for sure they were going to do fantastic through my real world simulation because of how good they look. There's our 357, and our 45 is just massive. That is one big jagged looking bullet there. But when we go through our real world simulation, everything has changed up. Not so good anymore. There's our 357 Magnum, just terrible. And here's our first 45, completely clogged with the fabric. It couldn't defeat that. And that alone is likely what caused the issue. Then our second 45, better, but yeah, I wouldn't trust that, to be honest, if the first one is like that. So not so good performance, but that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target. I'm not going to back up from here because the wind started blowing, and that's got a 14-degree wind chill today. It's a little bit cold, so I'm going to hurry up and get out of these woods. But I just want to see what kind of shootability these things have for me, practical shootability. So I'm just going to go front sight picture, pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target, and see how these things will do. So 357 mag. I wasn't used to that first shot. I think it might just be my gloves or something, but you can see I flinched there in that first shot. I don't really know why. It just happened. 45 ACP+P. Let's see how this goes. All right, so it got a little bit away from me there. You know, quite a bit of muzzle jump and recoil and all of that. So, you know, for what you're getting out of it, it's an interesting load here. It would be a good load, definitely for like law enforcement, because you got that very hard jacket that'll go through barriers better than copper jackets. This brass is really hard, so it would be a good load for that, and you know, it got good deep penetration and all of that. But I would say for the average person, it's just a little bit much penetration. But I'm not going to call it a bad load. It's okay for what it is. It just overpenetrated quite a bit. Now with that 357 Magnum, this is where we get into this thing where it's like both of them did pretty much the same. Not great performance, failed expansion. But it's one of those things where that's sometimes a common hallmark of a pistol like this. Short-barreled 45. It's kind of a hallmark of a short-barreled 38 Special, where you can kind of give it a little grace there because that's kind of how most rounds perform. So you got to look at the positives of it and say it did okay. And I would say it did okay. But with the 357 Magnum, the fact that basically everything performs out of a short barrel that's in 357 Magnum and you get no expansion, that is an absolute complete failure. Something you want to avoid because there's absolutely zero reason for it. As we're with this, there's kind of reasons for it sometimes. So on a technical note, I'm going to say our 45 did better here than our 357 Magnum, but I honestly wouldn't carry either of these myself. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.